Good evening students. Today we will discuss about the C preprocessors part 2. So in this video you will learn how we can create the macros with the arguments. In the previous video we have discussed about the macros and how we can create the macros in C language. And number of programs we have done in the previous videos, and now we are moving on to the next topic, and this next topic is the macros with argument. So this is the part number 2. So in this video I will cover here macros with the arguments and conditional compilations. So before moving on to this topic, just I want to discuss about the previous something part which is related to your macros. So students, in the last lecture, in the last video, we have discussed about the macros, how we can define the macros, what is preprocessor directives, and how the macros replaces the macro definition. So you can see that this is your hash include stdio.h, where hash is the preprocessor, and this is completely hash include stdio.h is called expansion. So generally include is here the keyword and stdio.h is your header file. Now we are moving on to this one. So you can see that how we can expand our macros. So before expanding, we can see how we can define the macros. So this is your hash define, then upper, this is the macro. You can say that is a macro name or macro simply, or 25. So this macro definition is macro expansion is 25 here. Upper is called macro template. So now this is the main function. This is variable declaration integer I equal to 1, I is less than equal to upper. So here upper is our macro. Corresponding to this macro, we have the value is 25. When the compiler will execute this program, this upper macro will be replaced by this expansion, and that will be replaced by the here 25, and it will print the values started from 1 to 25. Similarly, we have the another program. You can see that this is another program in which we have defining the macro. So hash define pi 3.1415. So here again, if you will see, this upper and this pi both are the macro template. So pi is a macro template and this is your macro definition. So macro definition, you can see that. Now this is the main program. In this main program we are going to declare a variables. R is the variable, area is the variable, and now we are going to calculate the area of a circle. So in this case, this pi is a macro which will be replaced by this value 3.1415 multiply by r, and it will print the area here. So here upper and pi in the above program are called macro templates. So that we have discussed also in the previous video, and we have also seen the execution of the programs, practical programs. Now we are moving on to the next topic, and that is your macros with argument. Now what are the macros with the arguments? As you know, when in case of a functions, we also supply the argument, and sometimes these arguments are called parameters. So similarly, in the macros can have the argument. So let us see an example by which we can understood how we can implement macros with the argument. So this is our hash include stdio.h. Then we are going to define the macro. So this is hash define, and then we are going to take an area is the macro template with the argument is x. Now corresponding to this area x, we are just going to pass the argument. So this is an argument 3.14 multiply by x multiply by x. Now braces close. Then we are going to declare the main function. So this is our void and this is your main function. So each of the main function or function have a return type. So you can see that this void is a return type and this is the function name main. Each function have a scope. So we are just going to declare the scope here. Now I am just going to write here the variables. So this is the first variable, float r1 equal to 6.25. I am making it a constant. Now r2 I am taking, that is equal to 2.5. Another variable I am going to declare, that is your a. So this is called variable declaration. Now we have declared here the three variables and we are just going to use this macro here. So in this case, if I want to calculate the area, so a equal to area and passing the argument. In this case, I am passing the argument as a r1. So when I will pass this r1 will be replaced with this x, and corresponding to x it will take the value r1 and r1. So that is the macro expansion here. Now if I want to print the value of a, how I can write? This is your print f. Then I can just print here, this is your area of circle equal to percentage f, that is called format specifier, then area a. Similarly we can find out another area. Suppose a equal to area and another passing the argument r2. So here r2 will be replaced by this x and then x value will be put here, r2 comma multiply by r2. Now I am going to print this value. So this is your printf and then slash n area of circle equal to percentage f double quote comma a. So we have written here the program with the macros argument. Now one thing that here to be observed is generally preprocessor find this macro. So when the compiler will execute this program, before executing this program the preprocessor find this macro here. So area x. So area x is finding in this program and then it expand this area with, generally it will expand with the corresponding argument. So corresponding argument is 3.14 multiply by r1 multiply by r1. So here x is the macro template, is an argument that matches the x with the macro expansion. Now the statement r1 is causes to the variable r to be substituted for the x here. Now you can see that for this one again it will replaces with this 3.14 multiply by r2 multiply by r2. So that is called macro arguments. The one thing that need to be careful about defining the macros with the argument is not leave a blank space here. So there should not be a blank between the area and the argument x while defining the macros here. Now the new thing that I want to tell you here, the entire macro expansion should be enclosed within the parentheses. That means when you are going to write the expansion here, so the expansion should be in the braces, then it will works fine. So this was the macros with the argument. Now we are going to execute this program. So let us start then copying this program into our code blocks. Now go to the code blocks, just click the file button, select the new file. So click the new file here. We are just going to write the program in C or C++. So just select it, go, then click on the next, then click on the next, then give the path here. I am just giving here the desktop path where I have stored the many examples. So this is another example, example 6, and then click on the save and click finish. Now I'm just going to copy it out. Suppose this is copy and paste. So I have written this program hash include stdio.h hash define area x, and this is the braces, and then we have copied it. Now we need to replace here with this comment here. So this is your comments. Either we can also write whole program in this code block. So this is our program. Now I am going to execute this program. So just click on the save button and build and run. So when you will run, you can see that this is the output, that is area of the circle. So area of the circle equal to 122.656250. Area of circle equal to 19.625000. One thing that need to be observed here, after the decimal it takes 6 digits value. So this is because floating point value by default it takes up to 6 decimal value. So this was the program related to our macros with argument. Now come to the next topic, and that is our next topic is conditional compilation. Now what is conditional compilation? Generally when we are going to use the macros in case of a C language, we can also use conditional macros here. That means the statement will only be executed when the will satisfy the condition, otherwise it will not execute. So let us see how we can define this conditional compilation. Generally we have two pre-processing commands. The first pre-processing command is hash if define, that means if define is there, and second is hash and if. So generally when we will write the conditional compilation using macros, how we can write it down? So there is a syntax for writing it down. So this is a syntax. So first of all I am just going to write the syntax here, hash if define, then we should write here the macro name, and then we can write here the statement 1, then statement 2. Similarly we can write any number of statement there, statement 2, and again we can write here the statement 3. So number of the statement we have written here, then that should be ended with the hash and if statement. So if the macro name has been defined, the block of the code will be processed as usual, otherwise it will not. That means if in a program this macro name will be appear, if the macro name is same as that of this macro name that we have defined, then these statements will be executed, otherwise it will not execute it. For example, I am just going to write a program here, so we can execute this program directly into our code, and like so this is, click on the file button, click on the new, then file, select the C or C++ source file, click next, then C file, then give the full path. So this is our conditional macro, so I am giving here condition macro.c. Save button, click on the finish. Now we are going to write a program with a conditional compilation. First of all, I need to define here hash include stdio.h header file, then hash, this is for defining any macros. Just we need to write out here the main function. So this is our main function is there, then we just use the curly braces for this defining the scope. Now what I am going to do, I am just going to here using if define. So this is your if define. Then I am writing a macro name. Suppose the macro name is Ajay, and then I can write here, as you can see that it automatically placing this and if, because this is a conditional compilation. Now I am going to write it here, printf statement. So this is printf. In this printf I am just going to write out hello, this is conditional compilation. And then this terminator, use the terminator here. Now in this main program I am just going to declare the variable here, like suppose this is your integer a, b, comma sum. Now if you want to get the input from the user, just use this input and write down here enter two numbers, then scanf, so that we can get the two numbers from the user, %d, then comma %a, comma %b, and then terminator. Now what we are doing here, we are just going to write here Ajay, that is your macro name, that is macro we have defined. Now what we are going to do, sum equal to a plus b, terminator, and just going to write here the printf statement. So this is our printf, where I am just going to write the sum is %d, comma, and then sum. Now I am just going to write here Ajay again. So just we have defined the macro here and with the name Ajay, in with the statement hello, this is a conditional compilation. Now we need to define here the macros. So we have not defined the macros on the above the main function. So firstly we need to define the macro here. So this is your hash, then define, and then we need to give here Ajay. Now we have defined the macro Ajay. So with the condition, when we are going to use conditional compilation, this conditional compilation must be defined into the main function. So whenever this Ajay macro name will appear in the program, then it will be replaced with this printf statement. So where we have used this macro, this is your Ajay. After the scanning of this hello, this is the conditional compilation, and then we have used the sum is conditional compilation. So how we can use this? Suppose I'm just going to execute it. Just click on the save button and then execute it. So yes, you can see that hello, this is a conditional compilation, enter two numbers. I am entering two numbers and the sum is this one. So by this way the program will be executed here. Now come back to our conditional compilation. So we have another conditional compilation statement that we can use in case of if, definition, and if. We have hash else, so that we can also use in our program. For example, we can use the syntax like suppose I am going to declare here the main function. So this is main. In this main I am just going to write conditional compilation with the if definition and else. If definition, and suppose this is your intel is your macro name, then we can write here the code, like suppose I am writing here the statement 1. So this is our statement 1. Then we can write here hash else. So that is the use of the else here. How we can use the else? So this is the statement number 2. Then we can use hash and then and if. So always if definition we are defining, that should be ended, that must be ended with the and if. So this is our statement 3, and then close the braces. So when you will compile this program, it would only compile the suitable code of the Intel if Intel will appear in the program, else it will execute the statement number 2, otherwise it will end if. Okay, so it behaves generally like an ordinary if else else control statement of the C language. So this was all about the conditional compilation. Now we are moving on to another most important topic. Actually, we have the number of directives we can use. As you can see, when I'm just going to this code blocks and when I am going to define any if and if, so it automatically show you hash. You can see that there are number of preprocessor directives. So we can also see that the definition of each of the preprocessor directives, how it works and what are these. So let us we start with this defining one by one. So I'm just going to tell you how these works. Suppose the first one, that is your hash define. You can also write it. So one by one we will see here how with the directives, how are the directives and what are the description for these. So let us we start with the first one, and this is hash define. And what is the use of this hash define? I can just write it down here. That means that substitutes a preprocessor macros. Substitute a preprocessor macro. Now second one, hash include, as we have already discussed about this one so much. So this is inserts a particular header file, file. Third one, that is your hash undefined. This is hash undefined. That means undefines. If you want to undefines a preprocessor macro, then we can use this macro. So next is hash if define, that we have already seen the example of hash if define. So it will returns only true if this macro is defined in our program. Now another one is hash if and define. So this is the major difference between if define and if not defined. If not defined means that is opposite to the if defined, that is it will returns true if this macro is not defined. Next one, that is your hash only if. We can also use the hash only if, that we can use for the test. We can apply the test here. So this is your test if a compile time condition is true. Another one, this is hash, this is your else. So as we have discussed about the else, the alternative of this is called, it is alternative of hash if. Now another one, we have another one is there. So let us we see. So this is your hash again, and this is elif, that means else if. Now this is hash else and hash if in one statement. That means you can also use both if as well as else. So it works like a else if. Now this is another one, hash, that is error, and this is most important, that only prints error message. If you want to print an error message, then you can print it. Now the last one, that is Pragama, 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 Pragma, Pragama. Now it issues a special command, to the compiler. It issues the special commands to the compiler using a standardized method. So there are number of these preprocessor directives. So we have discussed here the number of directives and description here. Each of the directives is starting with a symbol, that is your hash. And one more thing that must be observed here, that the first non-blank character, it must be the first non-blank character, and the preprocessor directive should begin in the first column. So this was all about the macros, and we have discussed here about the macros with arguments. Then we have discussed about the number of macros here. Apart from that, we have another important topic that we can discuss here, that is we have predefined macros are also there. Predefined macros. So what are predefined macros? Mainly we have the 5 predefined macros. First one is, we can also use this predefined macro in our program, like this is date. If you want to get the current date of the system, how we can find out? So this is the current date. It tells about the current date. The current date. And generally in terms, you can say that in terms of like month, firstly it will display the month, then it will display date, and then it will display in the format YY. Second, we have time. If you want to display the current time of the system, then you can use this macro, which will define the current time as a character literal. In the format, and the format is hours, then minutes, and then seconds. Third one, macros, that is your file, that we can also use this. Generally, if you want to display the current file name, so that will be contained by this predefined macros. So this contains the current file name, Fourth one, that is your line, and this line contains the current line number as a decimal constant. So this contains the current line number as a decimal constant. The last one, that is your STDC. Generally this macro, predefined macro, you can say that defined as one when the compiler compiles the ANSI codes. So that we have 5 predefined macros. Now suppose we can take this example, we can just see these predefined macros, how they work. So just come back to our code blocks. Now click on the new file button and then click file, then create C source file, click next, then select the file name. So we are just going to define here the predefined macro. So I am taking here the name of the file is predefined, then click on the save and then click on the finish. Now we are just going to write a program for these predefined macros. So first of all, we need to write here hash include stdio.h. Then we are just going to use here the void main. So this is our main function. Then we are going to define the scope. Then we need to write and print directly these macros, because these are the predefined macros, so we no need to be defined here. So I'm just going to define here the file. Suppose this file will return which file will return? This will return the current file name. So current file name is predefined.c. So let us be see. So this percentage s, this is your /n, then double quote, then comma, and then we just need to write here file macro. So this is file, then use the terminator. Similarly, we can also write the printf statement. So this is our printf, then we can use the date, then colon. Generally date we represent with the help of strings, so we are using the format specifier %s, then /n, then comma, then we are just going to write here the date. So this is also the predefined macro. Then again we are going to use the printf statement. So this is printf double quote. Now we are going to print the time. So this is your time. Again the time will be in the format of string. So we are using here the format specifier %s, then comma, we need to write here underscore. This is your time. It will tell you the current time of the system. Now we are going to use this printf, then double quote. Then if you want to check the current line, so which line number it is using, then again we can write here the macros, and generally line represent and it will return in the form of a constant. So constant must be of the integer type. So we are taking here the format specifier %d, then comma, and then underscore, then line, then underscore. Now again we are going to printf statement. So this is printf. Now we are going to write the ANSI code. So generally why we use this ANSI? Generally ANSI means it defines as the one when the compiler compiles the ANSI standard code. So we are just going to write here, if we are going to write ANSI, so it will return with the help of integer value, because it will return 1, either 0. So this is 1. So if we are taking format specifier %g, then underscore, then we are going to write stdc, and then underscore, then terminator. So we have written the program here. Now one thing that need to be observed here, when we are going to use this predefined macros, we need to define here underscore 2 times. So that is most important thing that you need to be observe here. So when you are going to define, so we need to use here 2 underscore for defining the particular predefined macro. So this is 1, this is second, and again this is first, and this is second. Similarly this is first, second, and this is first and second. Similarly for all the macros we need to define here the 2 times underscores. Now click on the save button, just click on the save button and then build and run. So it will execute the program and it will print the required output onto the screen. Now you can see that the file name is C users del desktop predefined.c. So this is the completely giving the complete location of the file name predefined.c. Now this is the current date 18th January 2022. This is the current time, that is 9:15. You can see that this is 9:15 p.m. and this is the line number 7, and then ANSI, because we are using this NSI standard code, so this is returning 1. So this is line number 7 finally, and finally we have printed. So one thing that we need to observe is here we need to use here to underscore here. So this was the program that we have defined using the predefined macros. So just remember here, so we need to use here double underscore. I have just written here the one underscore so that you can identify it, because when you are going to use two underscore, it is not looking like that we are going to use two underscore. It is just looking like a line. So just remember here, we need to use here two underscore here. So this was all about the macros with the arguments, conditional compilation, then number of pre-directives, and then predefined directives, and then predefined macros.